Welcome, everyone, to the Archives Department of the Golden Silent Films podcast, where we bring you great past content from the audio side of things and bring it to streaming life here on YouTube. This episode, Edgar Allen Poe, was originally released on the podcast outlets on October 25th, 2023, and we could not be happier to re-release it in such timely fashion because on this date that this comes out, an incredible couple, Amanda and Danielle, will be renewing their vows with an Edgar Allan Poe themed component to their celebration. So, please sit back, enjoy the show, and we wish the happy couple the best of lives. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. "Only this, and nothing more." Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the creepy confines of the Golden Silent Films podcast. The cobwebs are up, the ghouls and goblins are roaming the home office. It's the scary Halloween season, and we are starting down that road of a month of spooky cinema. Before us tonight is the life of one of the spookiest cats out there. It is the life of Edgar Allan Poe, as viewed through the lens of D.W. Griffith and early cinema. Before we perch ourselves above a chamber door, let's talk about the usual Golden Silent Films podcast social media roundup. As usual, please fly on over to Golden Silence Cast on Instagram for all your up-to-date info on this little show. And for all you folks on the Twitter or X, just rap, and gently tap at Golden Silence 1, or just search Golden Silence Cast and we ought to pop up there too. All these screen names and sites will be in the episode description in case you are interested in checking us out. We would love to have you on board. At both social spaces, you'll get behind-the-scenes pics and info, upcoming episode reveals, and other fun film-related materials, and photos of a couple of other spooky cats, Soda and Gizmo. Also, if you're listening to this program on Spotify or Apple Podcast, do leave a review, a rating, or both. Our show has been around for 3 years, and we are stuck on 11 reviews on iTunes. We would love to see that number grow, and you supportive silent film fans out there can make it happen. All of those ratings and reviews help greatly. Live your best review-leaving life and help our show grow and reach fellow silent film fans. Whether getting us more exposure in the underworld of podcasts or letting us know how we can improve, we appreciate that feedback and always want to bring you the best show possible. And do subscribe to Golden Silent Films podcast. While our output can be spotty, if you are subscribed, you will never miss an episode. And the moment new content drops, it will go straight to your listening device of choice. We are nearing the end of our third season and don't want you to miss a single scary second. Tonight, we are diving into 1909's Edgar Allan Poe. And one of the cool things about this short is its accessibility. There are a number of ways you can catch up with this 7-minute short. The first and most obvious would be the ever-present YouTube. There are a number of postings of the film to watch. The one I found the most interesting was the version uploaded by the Silent Film Restoration channel. This one was really cool because it had some upgraded visuals, and as a bonus after the short, you get some examples of their restoration process via some before and after comparisons. One of the drawbacks, though, is that it did not have any music to speak of. Another great location to catch this short is on Wikipedia. The page for this flick has a pretty solid quality version to watch, plus you get some of the production history at the same time. In the previous episode, we talked a bit about how Wikipedia is an underappreciated source for silent films, and this episode keeps that praise train going. I'm surprised it took us this long to add it to the How to View segment of the show. There is one caveat to this movie, though, and that comes with the spelling of Edgar Allan Poe. For reasons we will talk about in a bit, the titular author's name is misspelled. They did the Edgar and the Poe correctly, but fumbled on the middle name, spelling it Allen instead of Allan. This is something to be aware of as you search cyberspace for this short. Me talking about this spelling stuff will surely only make things more confusing and muddy the waters. You see, to find the page and film on Wikipedia, you'll kind of have to do the wrong spelling to find it easily. On YouTube, both spellings can work. In addition to restoring picture quality, the Silent Film Restoration channel also saw fit to restore the spelling of Edgar Allan Poe. So, long story short, our best advice is to spell the name wrong and put a 1909 after that, and you should be good to find it. Also, for you literary folks out there, here are two of the coolest resources we used in putting this episode together. It was a couple of autobiographies that really helped load up this episode with great facts, quotes, and stories. First, there is Billy Bitzer, his story, written by legendary cameraman Billy Bitzer and published nearly 30 years after his death in 1973. The other came from the pen of Linda Arvidson, entitled When the Movies Were Young, first published in 1969. Both of these books were great reads from start to finish, and it's from folks that don't always get the respect they deserve. They are also a fun read since both people were so close to a lot of the same events, and it was fun to see the movie industry from different viewpoints. If you're interested in reading either of these books, they can be found online through archive.org, as well as other sites and spots in the online world. So, with today's grammar lesson and book reports out of the way, let's spookily creep forward with more macabre movie minutia in this lengthy episode that covers a 7-minute movie. So, our look at the lives behind this movie start with Herbert Yost, born in Harrison, Ohio on December 8, 1879. After working in the family business for a bit in his youth, the now 17-year-old Herbert made the decision to leave home and pursue a career in show business like his older siblings, Walter and Harry. Harry was quite a supporter of his younger brother's ambitions by facilitating Herbert's entry into performing on stage by getting him a job in 1897 with the Murray Hart Comedy Company, which specialized in one-night stands. In its travels to various cities and towns, the troupe presented single performances of satirical plays. After one season working for Murray Hart, Yost moved on and joined the Frost Stock Company, doing a number of jobs in its traveling shows for a salary of $6 a week. He portrayed several characters in the company's staging of The Three Musketeers and The Two Orphans, and was responsible for entertainment of audiences by playing the piano before each show, during intermissions, and giving concerts following every performance. By 1901, Yost had left Frost & Company to work for nearly 7 years with a series of other stock companies all over the country. During that time, he also graced the stages of Broadway in several productions. One other thing that I consider very valuable for an actor, Yost would say, and which I have often heard advocated by actors of long experience, is the advisability of playing an engagement in stock every now and then. When an actor plays a role for an entire season, for instance, he inevitably acquires certain mannerisms of the role that will stick to him when he attempts his next. While in a company where he plays a different part every week, he acquires the knack of readily throwing off the previous character. A summer engagement in stock once every 3 or 4 years, while a tough experience in many ways, is well worth the hardship and the benefit the actor derives. By 1908, with more than a decade of experience traveling and performing with various companies, Yost had established himself a considerable reputation as a stage actor. Near the end of that year, he started to expand his thespian horizons by dipping his toes into the rapidly expanding motion picture industry. At that time, being a movie actor was the low rung of the acting ladder. It was a time when it could be an embarrassment to act in movies. It was seen as inferior and way less prestigious than legitimate theater. And an actor surely didn't want to bite the theater hands that fed him. Yost wanted to avoid any unpleasantness and harm to his reputation, so he adopted a stage name. He went with Barry O. Moore in an effort to conceal his identity, to distance himself professionally from the perceived negativities attached to the new world of cinema. Linda Arvidson, who we'll talk about in a minute, would write this about her co-star. Mr. Yost was one actor who used a different name for his picture work. He called himself Barry O. Moore in the movies. Not that he felt the movies beneath him, but he was nervous about the future reaction. He showed good foresight, for as soon as big theatrical producers got wind of the fact that their actors were working in moving picture studios, they decided to put a crimp in the idea. The Charles Frohman office issued an edict that any actor who worked in moving pictures could not work for them. But the edict was shortly revoked. Even so long ago, the power of the little motion picture began to be felt. So, even though he used a stage name in the film industry, when he was in the realm of theatrical acting, he kept his real name front and center in many of his Broadway roles and other stage productions. I mean, the man had a theatrical legacy to uphold. In October of 1908, Yost joined the growing number of photo players at the American Mutoscope and Biograph Company, which then had its headquarters at a main studio inside a sprawling renovated brownstone mansion at 11 East 14th Street in Manhattan. It was there where Yost got gigs working for D.W. Griffith, who, at the time, was just beginning his career as a film director. Yost's first confirmed screen appearance for Biograph came in the 1908 Civil War drama Guerrilla. In this role, he played a Civil War soldier. His second role came in 1909's The Criminal Hypnotist, which was filmed at Biograph's Manhattan studio on December 8th and 21st, 1908, and released the following month on January 18, 1909. Griffith cast Yost in that short to serve simply as one guest among a small crowd of partygoers. Interestingly enough, though, also playing partygoers in that scene were Linda Arvidson, Jeannie McPherson, and Max Sennett, all names we know. With his true love being the stage, his film career wasn't that long. But he was around during some of the most formative years of the fledgling film industry. His earliest film appearances came during that one-year stint with Biograph, that being 1908 to 1909. He followed that up with some time at the Edison Studios, first in 1909, followed by another stint in 1912 through 1915. On the personal side of the ledger, he entered wedded bliss when he married Agnes Scott in February of 1916. Scott, a native of Tennessee, was also a professional stage actress. The couple remained together until Herbert's death nearly 3 decades later. Federal census records and other official records indicate that they had no children, and for many years resided in Old Greenwich, Connecticut, located about 40 miles northeast of Lower Manhattan. After that, Yost would make a return to the stage. In fact, Yost spent the big majority of his final 30 years of his career acting his little heart out on stage. Despite his love of stage acting, he did return briefly to films during the early sound era. Recordings of his voice are therefore preserved in at least 3 screen productions, which he was cast and credited as Herbert Yost. Those releases were his debut, which was the 2-reel short Love, Honor, and Oh Baby in 1929, the feature comedy Fast and Loose in 1930, and finally the romantic drama The Age of Innocence in 1934. With a decades-long career on the stage and being well known amongst theater company circles as an accomplished character actor, Yost continued his Broadway career well into the 1940s. His final roles on stage came in the mid-40s. His final appearance was as the tragic gentleman in the 3-act comedy Jacob Kowski and the Colonel. That play, directed by Elia Kazan, premiered at the Martin Beck Theater in Manhattan on March 14, 1944. And Yost performed not only there during the production's 1-year run in New York, but he also played in the play's subsequent tour, which continued across the country until 1945, ending just 3 months before the actor's death. At the end of the day, though, Herbert Yost appeared on Broadway 32 shows. His life was a wealth of knowledge and experience of the world of professional acting, for stage and screen. In an article for the New York Times entitled Character Acting, What Retards and What Creates Versatility on the Stage, from January 29, 1911, we get a glimpse into that wealth of knowledge. Every actor should be a character actor, thinks Herbert Yost, who is playing the role of the harassed honeymooner in Overnight. Not that they should necessarily play for 10 years in stock as he did, for the grand opportunity is a thing that comes to actors more by accident than design. But in Mr. Yost's opinion, stock is the best preparation for a career on the stage. It affords the opportunity for display and encouragement of character work, and that he considers the true basis for a well-rounded proficiency. If there is a part for a laborer in the show, says Mr. Yost, a manager is as likely to pick out a type that he sees working in a trench or a scrub lady in a theater as to pick out a real actor and depend on him for the effect which that actor had made it his supreme business in life to be able to reproduce. For any actor who has been properly taught in the school of character should play a common laborer as well as a straight juvenile. A well-known manager once selected for an important role in a play a girl whose voice over the phone particularly pleased him. No two actors in 100 would play a juvenile role in exactly the same way, and they should not. Character enters into this as well as into other roles, and even a straight role bear the stamp of character training. Any man with a personality has peculiarities and mannerisms which a man with training can grasp and reproduce. This is one of the greatest dangers that confronts the profession. A man who has spent his time and his talent in fitting himself for acting is not considered, as opposed to a man who as more nearly looks the part, even if that man has no stage experience. This applies to what might be called the rank and file of the profession. For a comedian who has a big name, one who has starred, for instance, always has the first call. On the evening of October 22, 1945, Herbert Yost would shuffle off this mortal coil. In Manhattan that night, Yost failed to meet his wife as planned at the 46th Street Theater following her performance there in a play called Dark of the Moon. Concerned about Herbert, she quickly returned to their room at the nearby Bristol Hotel, where she found him unconscious on the floor. It was reported that Yost died in the room a short time later after midnight on October 23rd. Additional reports at the time cited a heart ailment as Yost's cause of death. So, we have talked about the man behind Edgar Allan Poe, but this pseudo-biographical short is not complete without the love interest, and in this case that is Virginia Poe, played by Linda Arvidson, who we mentioned a little bit earlier. Arvidson was born on July 12, 1884. She was born in San Francisco, California, to Swedish parents. Despite her Swedish roots, Linda Arvidson wasn't always willing to fess up to those Scandinavian origins. I couldn't breathe I had had a Swedish father and mother. Anna Q. Nilsson was the first actress who dared whisper her heritage, Arvidson told the Oklahoma News newspaper out of Oklahoma City back in 1933. Arvidson's first professional acting gigs came in her hometown of San Francisco on the stages of the Alcazar Theater in the 1904 adaptation of The Christian by British novelist Hall Caine. In this production, she portrayed one of the Fisher girls and earned a weekly wage of $3.40 for her performances. This was the start of a very successful acting career. She landed job after job. From acting to singing, she was consistently working. While working on one of these stage productions, Arvidson met David Wark Griffin, a supporting actor who at the time worked under the stage name Lawrence Griffith. Through the next few months in which Arvidson and Griffith were together, Arvidson spent time performing small roles in productions at the Burbank Theater in Los Angeles and at the Orpheum. When meeting Griffith for the first time, Arvidson immediately was struck by his presence, his talent, and his booming voice. The infatuation was mutual. In her autobiography, When the Movies Were Young, Arvidson recalls Griffith's encouragement, writing, "Lawrence condescended to a little conversation now and then. He was quite encouraging at times, said I had wonderful eyes for the stage, and if I ever went to New York and got in right, I'd get jobs on my eyes. Sounded very funny getting a job on one's eyes. Advised me to never get married if I expected to stay on the stage." Now this advice would go unused, as the two would only grow closer and move on down the path to matrimonial shenanigans. The two were soon married at the Old North Church in Boston. In 1906, Arvidson and Griffith moved to New York, where they began rehearsals for playwright Reverend Thomas Dixon's play, The Other Woman. As the two settled into the New York theater scene, Griffith learned about the Biograph Company and American Mutoscope and their work with moving pictures. To say the stage-trained couple was less than enthused about the world of film is a bit of an understatement. In her memoir, Arvidson wrote, "Mr. Griffith and I listened in on all the stories and experience the actors at the studio had to tell. We would have all the information we could get on the subject of moving pictures, those tawdry and cheap moving pictures, the existence of which we had hitherto been aware of only through the lurid posters in front of the motion picture places, those terrible moving picture places where we wouldn't be caught dead. But we could find use for as many of those little fives as might come our way." Now those fives she speaks of are the $5 the actors would make for a day's work. When Nights Were Bold served as Arvidson's first picture at Biograph. It was directed by Sidney Alcott and included Griffith in the cast as well. I'll leave it to Arvidson to explain why this was an important moment in a less than memorable experience. Arvidson would write, It came as pleasant news that a tabloid version of When Knighthood Was in Flower, to be called When Knights Were Bold, was to be screened at Biograph. There were 4, perhaps 5 persons in the cast in this premiere knighthood picture. My husband was one, so was I. The picture commemorates our only joint movie appearance. The actress continues, I recall only one scene in this movie, a backdrop picturing landscape with a prop tree, a wooden bench, and a few mangy grass mats. But there was one other set representing an inn. I never saw the picture and couldn't tell much about it from the few scenes in which I played. Cameraman and future D.W. Griffith collaborator Billy Bitzer certainly took notice of Arvidson in those early days. In his book Billy Bitzer, His Story, Bitzer would write, Linda Arvidson was also working in these pictures, flaunting a wicked petticoat in her Swedish way. She arrived at the studio concurrently with Griffith and was secretly his wife, but none of us suspected it. While the work in moving pictures would prove to be a great move and provide financial security, the two certainly had philosophical differences about this new art form. In a biographical article for the New York Community Trust, we learn more about these early days of the dynamic duo's cinematic endeavors. The article reads, The movie-making business soon dominated their lives. He became a director when his first picture, The Adventures of Dolly, with Linda playing the lead, opened in July of 1908. It was a success, and Griffith was given a contract providing for a weekly salary and a royalty. Miss Griffith later wrote, Had he known then that forevermore, through weeks and months and years, it was to be movies, movies, nothing but movies, David Griffith would probably then and there have chucked the job, or, keeping it, wept bitter, bitter tears. But that Adventures of Dolly short was a very important film for both Arvidson and Griffith. It was a great performance by Linda and the directorial debut of D.W. In this film, Arvidson played the role of Dolly's mother. In talking about this movie and his experiences on set, Billy Bitzer takes us deeper into the interesting relationship between Arvidson and Griffith. Bitzer would write, Griffith had asked for her and was given permission. Miss Arvidson, as we knew her then, was a woman of admirable character. While in California with a stock company in which they both played, they struck up a friendship which culminated in their secret marriage. Theirs was a romance which had its birth in Griffith's interest in poems, of which Miss Arvidson had a fund of knowledge. None of us suspected they knew each other outside of studio walls, for they were never seen either entering or leaving the studio together. On October 4th, 1909, Pippa Passes was released. This would be the biggest hit to that point for the film duo. The film was the first of their productions to attract the attention of the New York Times and to receive a favorable review from the venerable Big Apple paper. Arvidson served as Griffith's main cheerleader, supporting him through the many successes of Griffith's career, first as an actor, then a writer, then a director. Griffith wondered about the stories that would unfold if public spectators witnessed them together, and how that would affect the work they created together. As of 1909, those at Biograph were unaware of the Arvidson and Griffith marriage. The two kept their relationship confidential because personal and business matters were not known to intermingle and was deemed unprofessional. As I mentioned earlier, Linda was a little more accepting of a life in film. It was different for Linda. She enjoyed the make-do philosophy of the crude studio, the regular income, and even the parts she played, that Community Trust article reads. Though she accepted the life, she was in it for the art. She clung tightly to her ability to create emotion and do something special on that screen. As far as the trappings of Hollywood, she was quite a bit less enthusiastic. In a 1933 interview with the Oklahoma News, Arvidson bluntly explains, Today, Hollywood is phony. It's glittering. It's froth. They spend and earn their millions too easily. There's no struggle, no thought of the art, only of money and more money and how they can swamp the box offices, of giving the public thrills, cheap sensation, phony emotion, claptrap. It's disgusting to so degrade a beautiful art. I especially loved reading Linda's description and analysis of her film roles. She said she played the sympathetic, the wronged wife, the too trusting maid, waiting always, waiting for the lover who never came back. But mostly, I died. And that endpoint will be no different in the movie we're about to talk about later. Now, the couple would separate around 1912 and finally divorce on March 2nd, 1936, when Griffith wished to remarry. That article from the New York Community Trust really does a great job describing the dissolution of Arvidson and Griffith's marriage, as well as how Arvidson never let negativity slow her down. The article reads, "The Griffiths' marriage was ended finally by divorce in the 1930s. On July 26, 1949, Linda Arvidson Griffith died at the age of 63, almost exactly a year after the death of her former husband. Although her later years had passed in wealth and comfort, Miss Griffith never forgot the early days of struggle. In retrospect, they seemed the most rewarding days of her life. If it was possible to help others through some of their problem-ridden times, Linda Arvidson Griffith resolved to do so. And by her will, she established a fund that would give help and hope to those in need." So let's transition now from in front of the camera to behind it. Whilst many folks out there associate D.W. Griffith with being behind the camera, let's take a look at the literal man behind the lens, Billy Bitzer. Besides being known as Griffith's official cameraman, Bitzer had an incredibly innovative and cutting-edge career. Johann Gottfried or Gottlieb Wilhelm Bitzer was born on April 21st, 1872. To hear Bitzer tell it, though, a career in film was far from his mind. Bitzer wrote, "I was born in Roxbury, Massachusetts in 1872, but it wasn't until 1894 that the urge to make something of Billy Bitzer seized me. Until then, I had been satisfied with my lot as a silversmith, like my relatives and members of my family." Bosley Crowther, writer for the New York Times, in an article from October 15, 1939, writes, "When Griffith was still a ham actor, and he most certainly was, Billy was regarded as the greatest cameraman in the news business. He was, in a manner of speaking, the first American newsreel photographer, a legitimate claim based upon the fact that he took a picture of William McKinley being notified of his nomination for the presidency. He was the first cameraman to cover a war, the Spanish-American, in 1898. On top of early news photography, Bitzer also covered the biggest sporting events of the day. In a time when sporting events could only be read about, he took the opportunity to change that. Bitzer writes, "In 1899, I was the leading cameraman of the Jim Jeffries-Tom Sharkey fight at the Coney Island Athletic Club. The fight went 25 rounds, or 2 hours and 10 minutes, and we exposed 7.5 miles of film. A 4.5 lens with an 8-inch focus was used, and the old Biograph film was nearly 9 times larger than that used today. The film ran at 320 feet a minute as compared with 90 feet a minute for today's film." When Griffith joined Biograph, Bitzer became his cameraman. In 1908, Bitzer and Griffith would form a tag team, a power couple of sorts, for the first time. The two would work closely as a team for the rest of Bitzer's career, including when he left Biograph in 1913 for the Mutual Film Corporation, where Bitzer continued his innovative ways, perfecting existing technologies and even inventing new ones from scratch. During this time, he would be a pioneer in the field of matte photography while also making use of new and innovative lighting techniques, close-ups, and iris shots. Bitzer provided assistance during Griffith's directorial debut, 1908's The Adventures of Dolly, which was shot by Arthur Marvin. This flick was a great example of how critics and crowds aren't always on the same page. Billy Bitzer writes, "The Adventures of Dolly was good, but at first the exhibitors did not like it. Biograph decided to release the picture anyway in order to get some of their money back. The public took an entirely different view of it. They liked it and told their friends to be sure to see it. Then, of course, the exhibitors demanded more pictures of a like nature." He eventually succeeded Marvin as Griffith's regular cinematographer, working with him on some of his most important films and contributing significantly to cinematic innovations attributed to Griffith. The apex of Bitzer and Griffith's collaboration came with 1915's The Birth of a Nation, a film funded in part by Bitzer's life savings, and the epic follow-up Intolerance in 1916. During the ensuing years, Bitzer successfully translated the director's creative visual concepts to the screen, especially in composition and the use of lighting to create a mood. The two men got along incredibly well and were able to get the most out of each other. Griffith had an attention to detail that Bitzer cared little for, but both together, that's where things worked incredibly smoothly. Bitzer would explain, "Before his arrival, I as cameraman was responsible for everything except the immediate hiring and handling of the actor. Soon, it was his say whether the lights were bright enough or if the makeup was right. If the face was powdered up with pink powder, the eyelashes black and beaded with melted mascara, and the lips painted red, it was all right with me. I never bothered how they looked, just so I could see their faces in my aperture. A cameraman had enough to do watching rapidity of action and keeping the hand-cranked camera going at a steady pace to prevent the film from buckling. Though his name is not really as widely known, Bitzer had nearly as much power as the director in the films he photographed. He did almost as much to start Mary Pickford on the road to which led to universal fame as Mary did for herself. And he was one of the earliest artists to realize that, out of a crude black box with the lens and crank, could be drawn the most subtle effects and the most surprising images, writes Bosley Crowther. With a little talk of the who out of the way, let's talk about the what. Talk about the pre-production of Edgar Allan Poe. Now, the screenplay for this biopic was a co-writing endeavor of Griffith and Frank E. Woods. Filming of this short took place at the American Mutoscope and Biograph Company's New York studio. It was shot using 3 interior corner sets at the studio, which in 1908 and 1909 was located inside a renovated brownstone at 11 East 14th Street, New York City, like we mentioned a bit ago. The filming by company cinematographer G.W. Bitzer was completed in just a couple days, although records tended to differ on the exact dates. Profiles on the film at the Library of Congress cite January 21st and 23rd, 1909, as the dates in question, while Biograph production records, which are noted in the 1985 reference D.W. Griffith and the Biograph Company, give the earlier dates of December 21st and 23rd, 1908. Now, earlier we were talking about the spelling error in the title of this picture. I wish there was some sort of super cool backstory or deep-cut narrative reason to spell Allen with a rogue E, but there really isn't. I mean, chalk it up to carelessness or being in a rush. You see, this biographical short was planned to be released on or near January 19th, 1909, the centennial of Edgar Allan Poe's birth. Now, this one had an especially quick turnaround to make that January 19th target. But, alas, it wasn't meant to be. Edgar Allan Poe, with an E, was released on February 8th, 1909, and came in at a length of 450 feet of film used. Now, if you were seeing it during this initial release, you would have also seen it with another Griffith film, the comedy A Wreath in Time, as the two shared a split reel. Now, a Biograph advertisement in the February 6, 1909 issue of Moving Picture World called it a picture story founded on incidents in his career, which, while not pretended to be biographical, is intended to show him as a man of heart, in contradiction to the calumnies of his enemies. It portrays his devotion to his dying wife and the writing of that wonderful masterpiece, The Raven, for which he receives the paltry sum of $10. The subject as a whole is indeed a work of art and most timely commemorating this season of his birthday centennial. So as we march on to the movie breakdown itself, I wanted to say this one's going to be a little bit different. We're going to be a little out of our normal routine that we get so used to after these 30-some-odd episodes. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this was a quick production without much in the way of behind-the-scenes scoops to squeeze out. So, I was thinking, let's take this chance to switch things up a bit from a behind-the-scenes focus to a more historical bent as we focus on the real-life story of Edgar Allan Poe, Virginia Clem, and the writing of the famous poem The Raven. Also, to preface this segment, the life of Edgar Allan Poe is a crazy, complicated, convoluted rabbit hole filled with ups, downs, and way more information than any one episode of a podcast could adequately dispense. With that having been said, my plan is to give a little, and I mean a little, backstory to the events depicted in this film, mostly concerning Poe watching Virginia suffer from tuberculosis, his writing of The Raven, and its publishing. An entire podcast could be solely dedicated to Edgar Allan Poe and still have enough content to run literally forever. Before the movie begins, let's have Edgar Allan Poe tell us, in his own words, about the earliest stages of his writing The Raven. Now, this quote, and another we'll refer to later, comes from an essay Poe penned in the April 1846 edition of Graham's Magazine. The essay is entitled The Philosophy of Composition, where Poe takes you behind the curtain of his writing process. Poe writes, "At all points I asked myself, of all melancholy topics, what, according to the universal understanding of mankind, is the most melancholy? Death was the obvious reply. And when, I said, is the most melancholy of topics most poetical? The answer here is obvious, when it most closely allies itself to beauty. The death, then, of a beautiful woman is unquestionably the most poetical topic in the world, and equally is it beyond doubt that the lips best suited for such a topic are those of a bereaved lover." This is a perfect prologue to this film. It's like he's a professional writer or something. So the movie opens with Virginia in bed, ill from tuberculosis. The chamber is small and humble. Amongst normal home decor is a pallid bust, perhaps of Pallas, on a shelf near the window. Here, Virginia is played by Linda Arvidson. At this point in her life, Arvidson was on or near the 35-year-old mark, and she looks it, even though in real life, Virginia Clem Poe was only 17 or so. So, by my calculations, when this would be taking place, and they were wed 4 years before that, so if you do the math, that made Virginia creepily young at the time of marriage. And she was his cousin. There is a lot going on there and a lot to unpack. But let's turn to Time magazine to kind of set the scene of Edgar Allan Poe's life at this point. We read, "Unlike the narrator of The Raven, Poe managed to move on from early tragedies and was engaged to be married by the time he left home to attend the University of Virginia. When he returned, his fiancée was engaged to someone else. Finally, when he was 27, he married his 13-year-old cousin. By the time The Raven was published, his child bride was dying of tuberculosis," writes Jennifer Latson in an article for Time magazine from January 2015. With much effort, Virginia wills herself out of bed and moves about the small room. She drops to her knees, praying to the heavens. Weary and exhausted, she lays back down in bed. This is where we get our first look at Edgar, portrayed by Herbert Yost. He is incredibly sad and heartbroken about her condition, and shows he is writing and trying to turn their fortunes around. She is too cold to really pay attention. Seeing this, Edgar takes his coat off and lovingly covers his beloved up. He continues to reassure her that everything will be okay. Now, this is Herbert Yost at his most stage acting. He is hamming it up as he goes through the fits of dread and sadness, explosively acting broadly for all the theatergoers in the back, despite not having a live audience. The transition from stage to film is in its infancy here, and you can really tell. But, on the bright side, one great thing about Yost's performance is his resemblance to Edgar Allan Poe. He does a really great job of capturing the visual look of Poe, and that really does aid the sometimes overly dramatic performance. While he's in the throes of emotions, he has a vision, a very familiar vision to anyone watching this movie. Remember that bust I mentioned earlier? Now a raven sits atop it. Poe is in shock and disbelief. The terror prompted by the mysterious appearance of the raven turns to inspiration as Edgar grabs a pen, sits down, and starts writing, struck by divine intervention. Now, having the raven in the chamber was an important concept for Poe as he wrote. Poe explains, "The next point to be considered was the mode of bringing together the lover and the raven. And the first branch of this consideration was the locale. For this, the most natural suggestion might seem to be a forest or the fields, but it has always appeared to me that a close circumscription of space is absolutely necessary to the effect of insulated incident. It has the force of a frame to a picture. It has an indisputable moral power in keeping concentrated the attention, and of course must not be confounded with unity of place." With the poem begun, he dashes over to Virginia and tells her what has happened. It is the answer to her earlier prayers. His divine inspiration has resulted in a poem that will change their fates. He is giddy with excitement, while the dying Virginia can only hope things will take a turn for the better. He continues to write, the words pouring out of him, as the raven stands watching. We are now in a publishing office where Edgar comes rushing in to sell his masterpiece. He is trying to sell it to the guys at the office. He tells them it is the next big thing. They'd be fools, in fact, not to buy it. Despite Poe's best efforts, though, these dudes just don't see it. He is then shooed out of the building. One of the editors in that scene was played by Arthur Vaughan Johnson, born February 2nd, 1876. Johnson was a well-respected director and actor. He got his film start in 1905 at Edison Studios before moving to Biograph. While at Biograph, he worked with the likes of Mary Pickford and Florence Lawrence, and was said to be a favorite of Griffith. He would move on to Lubin Studios in Philadelphia in 1911, where he transitioned to directing. Johnson died, however, on January 17, 1916, at the young age of 39 after health issues brought his career to an end in 1915. Now, having met failure and ridicule at his first stop, Poe heads into another publishing house. Here, a man and a woman are working and doing various paperwork. Poe first talks to the woman, who reluctantly takes his manuscript and gives it a read. She looks at it for a moment before laughing and handing it back to him. The dejected Poe starts moving to the door when the other fellow tells him to stop. The male editor reads it. He can't get enough and loves it, much to the chagrin of his coworker, though. Pure joy and happiness overtake Edgar. This guy sees the vision and starts handing cash to Edgar, who immediately leaves the office. In an article by Joy Lansendorfer for the website Mental Floss, we learn a bit about the post-Raven success for Poe. Lansendorfer writes, Poe was soon so recognizable that children followed him in the street, flapping their arms and cawing. Then he'd turn around and say, "Nevermore," and they would run away shrieking. Trying to capitalize off this fame, he gave lectures that included dramatic readings of the poem. They were apparently something to see. Now we return back to the film and to the Poe residence. Virginia is still deathly sick and in bed. She is delirious and unable to see. She reaches out for her husband, but only grasps empty air. She grows more feverish and wilder before passing out. Just as she is passing out, Edgar comes in triumphantly with a basket of food and linens. Still perched above that bust is that mysterious raven that got the whole ball rolling. The now successful Edgar pulls out a super comfy blanket to cover up his sick wife. As he tells her the amazing news, he realizes she's dead. He freaks out and yells to the raven before crumpling in a heartbroken heap over his dead wife. And that is how the film ends. Now, the makers of this movie were definitely playing fast and loose with a lot of facts about the life of Edgar Allan Poe, above and beyond the spelling of his name. The timing of things in this quasi-biopic were off by quite a bit. In the movie, Virginia dies just as The Raven is published. In reality, however, The Raven was first published in 1845, and Virginia finally succumbed to the tuberculosis in 1847. But she was sick when it came out, so they were close, we'll give them that. And also, the fame and fortune this movie implies Poe received was actually quite the opposite. Turning back to Joy Lansendorfer, we read, because of copyright laws, publications didn't have to pay Poe to reprint his poem. As a result, The Raven made him very little money. He was so poor that he wore his one coat buttoned up to his chin to hide his raggedy shirt. He was struggling just to feed his family, keep the house warm, and care for the ailing Virginia. In 1846, a friend wrote about their pitiful circumstances. Virginia lay on a straw bed, wrapped in her husband's great coat, with a large tortoiseshell cat on her bosom. The cat and the coat were the sufferer's only means of warmth. Virginia would die on January 30th, 1847 in the Bronx, New York, at the age of 24. Edgar Allan Poe followed her 2 years later when he died on October 7th, 1849, at the age of 40. The February 13th, 1909 issue of Moving Picture World published the following review of Edgar Allan Poe. The review reads, "The picture itself does not represent a connected series of actual occurrences. All the events shown in the picture actually occurred in Poe's life, but not altogether. Nevertheless, it is a pathetic series which is offered, and the audience, or that part of it which has taken some interest in Poe, was held quiet while the picture was running. The technical quality of the film is good, and the action is excellent. The makeup of the character representing Poe is to be heartily commended. The film should serve to draw attention to a character too little known and understood in the history of American literature. Now, shortly before the film's release, Biograph's crack marketing team took to advertising it as a story of a work of art that the company produced to commemorate the season of Poe's birthday centennial. A couple weeks later, the Dixie Theater in Fairmont, West Virginia, characterized the picture play in its newspaper advertisement as a class production. And since Biograph, as a company policy, did not credit its cast of players on screen or identify them in any promotions for its release, the theater's management simply described the presentation of Poe's life as being portrayed by clever Biograph actors. The film still exists deep in the catacombs of the Library of Congress, with additional copies located internationally. According to Wikipedia, an original 1909 paper roll of contact prints, made frame by frame from the short's now lost 35mm master nitrate negative, is preserved in the film archive of the Library of Congress. That paper roll, reduced in size, measures only 161 feet in length, instead of the film's full-size release length of 450 feet. Submitted by Biograph in 1909 to the United States government, shortly before the film's release, the roll of paper prints is part of the original documentation required by federal authorities when motion picture companies applied for copyright protection for their productions. While the library's paper print record is not projectable, a negative copy has been transferred onto modern polyester-based safety film stock, as well as a positive copy for screening. That work was part of an extensive decade-long preservation project done at the Library of Congress during the 1950s and early 60s. The project, performed by Kemp R. Niver and other library staff, restored more than 3,000 such paper rolls in the library's collection and transferred most of them, including Edgar Allan Poe, to safety stock. Additional copies of this short were preserved in various film archives in the United States and Europe, including a copy, as previously noted, at the Eye Film Museum in the Netherlands. As we lay this episode to rest, it is time to find out where your favorite silent stars are laid to rest. This is the segment where we join our favorite cinematic stars on the other side of the cemetery gates. The history, the art, the celebrity spectacle converge, and where are they now? Your guide to paying your respects to the amazing cinematographers that have entertained us so much. We are closing out this literary adventure with a visual storyteller, Billy Bitzer. For all the amazing innovations and techniques Bitzer brought to the film world, he was also a trailblazer for his fellow cameramen. In a portion of his book written after his death, we learn, against the opposition of Hollywood producers, Billy Bitzer in 1926 founded the International Photographers of the Motion Picture Industries, or IPMPI, of which he was twice president, and he was proud of his honorary life membership in Local 644 IATSE, the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees. After working in 1920's Way Down East, he would work as one of several cameramen on 5 more D.W. Griffith films. Included in that group was The White Rose in 1923, America in 1924, Drums of Love in 27, Battle of the Sexes, which may sound familiar, in 1928, which was a remake of the 1914 film and a film we covered in our first ever episode, and finally, 1929's Lady of the Pavements. Despite all of his success and accomplishments of a remarkable career, Billy Bitzer was unable to work his silent magic in the age of the talkie. With sound in full swing, Billy Bitzer's career seemed to peter out. Even though his career had slowed down, the appreciation people had for him was immense. In the epilogue section of his autobiography, we read, In 1939, before his first heart attack, he was asked by the Museum of Modern Art to collate and annotate all Biograph bulletins and other materials donated to their archives. While doing this, he began to write down his recollections and record the events that made up the substance of his book, his autobiography. In the winter of 1943, it continues, he was hospitalized, and in January of 1944, he was sent to California by his doctor to avoid the New York winter and went for recuperation to the motion picture country home in Woodland Hills. On April 29, 1944, Bitzer suffered a heart attack and died. The legendary cinematographer was buried in Cedar Grove Cemetery in Flushing, Queens, New York. He was laid to rest in an unmarked family plot in the cemetery. Like I mentioned earlier, his autobiography, Billy Bitzer, His Story, was published posthumously in 1973. And one last note on the influence of Billy Bitzer. A 2003 survey conducted by the International Cinematographers Guild named him one of the 10 most influential cinematographers in history. Bitzer, it is said, developed camera techniques that set the standard for all motion pictures. So with our time together coming to a close, we hope you enjoyed this special Halloween Edgar Allen Poe-sode. See what we did there? Clever. With the quasi-life story of one of literature's scariest minds behind us, let's return to more upbeat surroundings and bring this special Halloween seasonal episode to a close. Did you enjoy this look at the writing of The Raven? What are some of your favorite Edgar Allan Poe stories? What are some of your favorite Edgar Allan Poe adaptations in the film world? Let us know all that and more at the various social media spots of the Golden Silent Films podcast. On that note, if you have forgotten, we are on Instagram and Twitter/X. Let us know what you think of this episode. What silent and silent-related movies, past, present, literary works do you want us to look at next? Our world of silent movie knowledge and experience is constantly growing, and we need your input for our future episodes here in Season 3 and beyond. You can always find us at Golden Silence Cast on Instagram and at Golden Silence 1, that's at Golden Silence and the number 1, on Twitter/X. And again, if you listen to the show on Apple, Spotify, or any other podcast outlet that allows it, subscribe, you rate, and you review. It does a lot for our visibility, and we love hearing your thoughts and ideas. We really appreciate all of your incredible support, and seeing how much you folks are listening only makes us want to make bigger and better episodes. We hope you had as much fun with this biopic breakdown as we did writing it. With all of that being said, thank you to all of you fine listeners for all of your fine listening. And as always, don't forget, the silents are golden, and the talkies, they're just a fad. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on that pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door. And his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow on the floor. And my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore.